Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we should be live. Welcome to another episode of Radio Retrofuture, the last stream of the year, probably. Maybe we'll do an end of the year stream, I'm not sure yet. And today I have with me Arthur O'Keefe, who is streaming from Japan. And this mad lad, it's 4 a.m. if I'm not mistaken, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, it's still dark outside.
Okay. So, yeah. So, yeah. I guess we'll just start with who you are, and then we're probably gonna talk about how you ended up in Japan, because I'm curious. So, yeah. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm from New York originally, um, and um, as far as how I came to Japan, I came over here in the U.S. Navy back in 1985, and I guess, long story short, after returning to civilian life, I just decided to sort of stay here, and I hadn't actually planned on staying as long as I have. It just worked out that way, and I mostly have taught English. I'm currently working at a private women's university in Tokyo. Uh,
Okay.
it's my day job, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in Kanagawa, which is near Tokyo.
All right. So, how long have you been in the Navy?
Well, I joined in 1984, got out in 1989, November, so a little under 6 years.
Oh, now still impressive.
After that, I just started teaching. Well, I was teaching English for a while, and so-called eikaiwa. Um, uh, I guess everybody's probably heard of Berlitz. It wasn't Berlitz, but something similar, just like not for credit or anything, but oh, that beer looks very nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
this
got
is
coffee because it's four
Oh
o'clock.
yeah, well it's too late too late for them. That is
Oh, that.
Belgium. Yeah, it's a Belgian beer,
Oh,
or at
it is
least
nice. Yeah.
well, actually I think it's Dutch owned. But let me see. I think this might actually be of Hertog Jan, but I'm not sure. Yeah, InBev, which is the people who own Hertog Jan as well. So it's actually
Oh,
Dutch owned. But
okay.
yeah. So, Japanese, is that a language you had to learn for the Navy, or?
No, actually, although the people that would really have to learn Japanese in the military, in the U.S. military, would be maybe people that are dealing specifically with uh, liaison duties and stuff, maybe with their Japanese counterparts. My experience at the time, and I don't know about now, but um, the U.S. military bases in Japan, or perhaps in other countries as well, are sort of like a kind of island of sort of Anglophone culture, as
Okay.
it were, and you don't really have to know Japanese in order to sort of function, as you've kind of got the base as an anchor, so to speak. But I you know uh, did study a bit, little by little. Not
Mm-hmm.
and I speak some, but I'm not as good as I should be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And teaching, has that always been something you wanted to do, or is that just something that just happened?
Um, guess it was something that not something I'd always wanted to do, but then I was in Japan in the military, and I got to know a few people that were actually doing it, and it looked like it looked interesting. It looked kind of fun. So I thought, well, maybe I'd like to try that. So,
All right.
yeah, and initially I hadn't considered university. I just did the so-called eikaiwa, which literally means like English conversation. And I worked for one of those schools for quite a long time. It's sort of um, imagine a kind of cubicle with three or four students, and you're just teaching them how to sort of use the language in a practical way. It isn't done for any
Oh,
kind of course credit, but it does go into things like business English or
right, right.
standardized English tests such as the TOEIC or the TOEFL. But yeah.
Well, it does sound like a fun job. But let's talk about your writing. The Spirit Phone, I think it was due November next year, if I read it correctly. Is this your
November
first book?
15th. Yes. Well, technically, it's not my first book. It's my first novel. The first book I actually got published is a listening and dictation English textbook for high school students in Japan that I co-authored with two of my colleagues at the university where I work, and that was released by a Japanese publisher, of course, but very, very different sort of genre. So this is my first novel. Before this, as for fiction, I got a few short stories published.
All right. And well, let's go into the Spirit Phone for a moment, and then we'll talk about some of your other creations. What's the Spirit Phone about, and what's the genre?
Well, okay. That was the question I feared. Um, Interestingly, I in communicating with my publisher, I was told, please, by all means, share information about your book. But please don't mention a specific genre. Apparently, um, the genre in which to categorize the Spirit Phone is still actually being decided upon. If you go to the publisher's website, the book page, genre is currently listed as fiction.
Oh.
I think it's perhaps cross-genre. It has elements of science fantasy, I think steampunk horror. Um, uh, let's see, and I guess broadly speaking, I wanted to write, an interesting adventure story, really. Uh, with, again, elements of paranormal, the occult, as well as, I think, yeah, I'd say steampunk elements. I don't know if I would actually call it a steampunk novel. If you define steampunk as, in a more narrow sense, I guess, as an offshoot of cyberpunk, which there's, for example, there might be a protagonist who has very special skills who is being offered some kind of deal by bad
Well, yeah,
guys.
you're talking more about tropes now, but
That's true, yeah. It doesn't necessarily have that, but if we define steampunk as being a Victorian milieu with anachronistic technology, then yeah, you could certainly say that there is a steampunk element because there is an airship, for example.
no, okay, yeah, well,
Speaking of
yeah.
tropes, I guess, yeah. Uh, but I guess it's kind of cross-genre. When I was seeking a publisher, I was calling it dark urban fantasy, which I suppose also fits.
Oh, yeah. Martial R, alternative historical fiction, perhaps. So I did find you on the alternate history forum. Yeah.
Yes, it's also alternate history. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, because and the alternate history element is that, and that was actually the point that first hit me, so to speak, when I thought of the book. And that was actually, I remember the day, August 15th, 2009. And I'd been recently rereading about the so-called Edison Spirit Phone. And the only thing that's known factually is that Edison did say in a couple of interviews, Thomas Edison, that he wanted to try to develop a device to communicate with the dead, if such were possible. And I'd been reading about it, and then suddenly I thought, oh, wouldn't that make a novel? You know? And so the alternate history element is that Edison has actually succeeded, and he is marketing it for sale.
Right. Yeah, well, for me, it's interesting because my book has similar elements in it with radio signals. For the people who watch me longer, know that my book, as antagonist at least, was inspired by number stations. Um, but yeah, so can you tell us a little bit more about the history of the Spirit Phone and what happened to it or what didn't happen?
Oh, well, as for the real life counterpart, the spirit phone. And interestingly, Edison himself, as far as I know, never actually used the term spirit phone. That was sort of adopted by the media afterward. But he mentioned it, and then in a couple of interviews in 1920, I think it was, and then after Edison's death in 1930. I believe 1933. I posted about it on Instagram. There was an article in a magazine called Modern Mechanics and Inventions. I think it is.
Like an old magazine, because I recall,
Yeah.
or is that really all around for that long? It's also possible.
It's an old one. It was back in 1933. I don't think the magazine's currently in publication, but and I also, a blogger actually put that up on her site, and including the original text, and I posted on Instagram. But anyway, there's this story, an anecdote. Allegedly, Edison in 1920 or something got together with some other scientists, and he utilized his experimental spirit phone. And very different, by the way, from the spirit phone in my novel. I just made up mine from scratch.
Right. Okay.
But anyway, the spirit phone Edison attempted didn't work, and it dealt in the supposedly real spirit phone had this beam thin of light, thin beam of light, and supposedly a disturbance of this beam was supposed to indicate the presence of a spirit. Right, without going into the details of how it was supposed to have been set up. But anyway, the thing is, there are no notes, no plans, no extant devices. So all there is this anecdote. So there's no evidence that Edison actually attempted to build it. But in this book that was published, this is what I found to be an interesting point. Can I go off camera for a moment?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay. Right. So this book was published posthumously in 1948. Sorry, it's the title is The Diary and Sundry Observations of Thomas Alva Edison. And in the original 1948 edition, which is this one, there's a final chapter called The Realms Beyond. The entire chapter deals with Edison's speculations about life after death and his idea for a spirit phone. But then, after this initial edition came out, this chapter was redacted. It was taken away. All subsequent editions had nothing. So that's fodder for, conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
But I think I've read that the actual reason, and I don't know this for sure, is that Edison's surviving family requested that chapter not be included. And if that's true, my own speculation is that maybe while spiritualism was a kind of respectable thing to think about in certain quarters, and belief in the paranormal, seances, all that, from late 19th century up to, say, at least the 1920s or so. Maybe by 1948 and afterward, it was there was a more of materialist kind of way of thinking. It might, and some people thought, oh, we don't want Thomas Edison's legacy associated with all this woo-woo stuff. Maybe.
Yeah.
But that's the speculation. But if you go to the official websites related to Edison and so on, there is no mention of it.
Shame. Senior, question for Arthur. Are you related to Arthur O'Keefe, the cardiologist?
No, I think I'm familiar with him in that when I'm checking to see where my website comes up. So yes, I'm aware there's a cardiologist named Arthur O'Keefe in New Jersey. Not that I know of, but I suppose it's possible. Yeah.
Okay.
I was once asked if I was related to Georgia O'Keeffe, but again, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Let me see. Where were we? So you said you also. Let's continue on. I find this telephone fascinating. So was it supposed to be used during seances to see if there was like a spirit in the room, something like that, or was it actually like a phone, as in we're gonna call people in the afterlife?
That's a good point. I think the Edison alleged real life spirit phone did not seem to have a kind of audio communication element. Again, it was more like to detect the presence of
Right.
spirits. The one in my novel, which I would again say is completely fictional, not even based on anybody's allegedly real one, looks something like a phonograph. It's the metallurgy of the horn, of the phonograph-like horn, is a key element in making it work. And it's very simple. It's just got like two 1.5 volt dry cells, a switch, and an electromagnet to make a weak field, and this vertical metallic horn on a platform. But as for Edison's spirit phone, the alleged one was this kind of detection device with a beam of light, the way it was described. But Edison himself never, at least to the extent that it was described in that 1933 magazine I mentioned, I apparently didn't talk about that. You know.
Let's see. Marshall R. Maybe Edison was trying to create an electrical adjunct to the Ouija board.
Ah, okay, yeah, that's quite possible. Oh, okay. Marshall R. Okay, I think that's my brother.
Okay.
Hi. um, yeah, that seems like what it was. But I think what Edison actually said was that he felt that Ouija boards and yeah, essentially I think that's true. But Edison said that Ouija board seances and like the rapping on the table kind of stuff, he considered it silly and very unscientific. So he wanted to develop something technological
Right, right.
to determine whether it was true or not that people live beyond the grave. And even in his own words in the chapter, the later redacted chapter, he didn't assert that life after death was real or not, but he felt that if he could develop this kind of device, if it's possible for those beyond the veil, shall we say, to communicate with us, he could prove that. But yeah, the spirit phone in my novel is actually referred to as an electrical Ouija board by
Okay.
Aleister Crowley, who is one of the
Yeah,
two main
the Golden
protagonists.
Dawn. Oh, I'm kind of like thinking about those magazines now. Like they had some incredible illustrations about like all these. Well, not I guess they would call it futuristic, not so much science fiction. About helicopter powered infantry and stuff like that.
Um,
Uh, Let's see. Senior to Christopher Bunches, are you hurt or that black thing on your arm is just profession? No, I've got a infected sinew, so I'm
oh,
stuck to this for. Yeah, my body's really breaking down this winter. It's really freaking annoying. Everything is getting infected.
it gets better soon.
Yeah. But yeah, let's see where. Yeah. So maybe we can do a stream sometime on those mechanical magazines because they've got some interesting stuff in there. So you also mentioned that you've got some published short stories. Where did your journey into writing begin, and what genres have you experimented with?
Okay. Um, well, I always wanted to do something with speculative fiction, something fantastical, and also things that were, you know, I guess deeply psychological. And I guess I've been writing a long time, I guess since my teens, but I never actually tried to get anything published until relatively recently. And and I guess it was the spirit phone idea that really got me going, and I'd been working on it on and off for almost 10 years, and then I'd been contributing articles to the Japan Times, which is the biggest English language newspaper in Japan, and they would have this end of the year party in Tokyo, and 2017, December. The venue was a place in Roppongi, Tokyo, called the Pink Cow, and I met for the first time an author named Patrick Parr. And Patrick was also a Japan Times contributor, so he was also at the party. And his publications he's written fiction. The bulk of what he's been producing has been lots of different articles, and he was, at the time, he was about to come out with a biography, a slice of life biography of Martin Luther King Jr. About his days as a seminary student, called The Seminarian. And it's quite a groundbreaking book in that he was the only King biographer who was able to track down King's ex-girlfriend, who was a young white woman, and this is around 1950, right? Very taboo. And
Right,
it
yeah.
was known, but so it's really a fascinating book, even for the general reader, or if you want to get into the history of the civil rights movement and so on. But anyhow, I knew Patrick for a year, and I'd told almost nobody about the Spirit Phone. And I said to him, okay, I've got this idea. I want to show you what I got written. And I had like 10,000 words written. So this is like a year later. I showed it to him, and I didn't have the confidence that I could finish this book. And I knew he was an experienced writer, and by that time we'd become friends. And I said, would you be co-author with me? And he said, yeah, okay. And then after a while, he said, no, look, this is your baby. You can do this. I realized I could do it, and I realized that he realized it, but I also kind of promised him that he could be co-author. So he kind of bowed out.
Wow.
And I did it myself, and he gave me a tremendous amount of feedback that was very helpful. So I feel that he was the key person in helping me to understand that I could write this. Yeah. So that was sort of what helped give me the confidence to start writing more. And then and then by that time, I had decided to just make writing the book part of my everyday life. And for anybody that's written, I guess, and I'm still relatively new, I suppose, I think once you sit down and do it, creating the first draft is really not difficult. That's not the hard part. What's really hard is afterward. Michael Crichton said, books are not written, they're rewritten.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that, and it's funny because I wrote something similar in my latest book. You just said it better than I did, but and then I wish that there's so many YouTube channels on writing, and none of them talk about the editing process. They all talk about like the plot lines and the characters and all these theories on character development, and now I've written so much like on the website there are 30 stories alone. I recently just published a new one, by the way, a very short one, but I'm really proud of it. The Herald's Bell, something that I've been sitting on for a year. Then it really is short, and it's like okay. Anyway, but it's Anja Bache. She is a well-known German steampunk author, and she said, "Wow, you're probably one of the few people who actually mention." The problem with the things that actually matter when it comes to the writing process. And I think when it comes to fiction writing, especially for people who say they want to write, you probably know them yourself. They're so occupied with their world, so to speak. Um, they don't think about how do you write a proper sentence. Uh, because that's also
Yeah.
where, for me, the world building happens. What was your approach to world building? Do you have a philosophy about that?
Um, right. I I don't know if I have a particular philosophy. My approach to writing the Spirit Phone was, I guess, a bit haphazard and chaotic, and then gradually becoming more orderly. And I would just come up with vignettes, anecdotes. One major crucial part of the novel, for example, was something that just came to me as I was taking a train, an Amtrak from New York to Washington, D.C., for example, and it had been based on an experience I'd actually had at Penn Station, New York. And so it's very disparate, and the things that I find that as far as the world building and its connection with the story itself, the episodes or the elements I think of in the order that I think of them don't actually come into the order in the book. It's all so random. And as you mentioned, I don't think it's a good idea to be so analytical, at least not at the beginning.
Right.
For sure. So I guess the world building, so to speak, I think it comes for me after the story and the story elements have been decided. What kind of world do I need to accommodate these elements?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. I'm not sure in how what fashion this applies to you, but do you remember when you first heard or were introduced to steampunk?
Yes.
That's the question.
And maybe my memory is, not quite accurate, but I'm pretty sure that my introduction to the genre was reading. I mean, as far as steampunk being related to the actual term, was the book "The Difference Engine" by William Gibson
Yeah.
and Bruce Sterling. Really impressive, and just the conceptual element of it, the idea of a working computer having been made successfully, in this case by, of course, Charles Babbage in the early 19th century, and what could have happened. And I think that was part of my inspiration for developing the Spirit Phone. I wanted to think of an interesting what-if scenario historically. Although in the case of Gibson and Sterling, I think everything that they've written about is plausible in terms of, I can't say for sure. Maybe there is something not feasible, but to me it seems perfectly feasible that you could have a humongous mechanical, giant computer that runs by mechanical means, whereas in my case the book is just this there's a strong fantasy element, I guess.
Right.
Of the occult.
Well, they actually did build a replica is not the right
Working
word.
model.
A working model. That's probably a good description of it. Although they did say like that Babbage could probably not have created this with the technology he had at hand.
Okay.
So it's engineering stuff and metallurgy stuff that just too precise, the tools. And what I know of Babbage himself, and one of the reasons the project was not completed, was that he redesigned the machine while it was being made, which probably not the best idea, especially so
he's having to deal with the other people, the metallurgists, the other engineers who are working for him, and they were
he also, if I recall correctly, he also had a falling out with the guy working for him, who was actually making the machine. And I think there was an element in there that the guy, out of spite, took the tools along with him. There was a lot of mismanagement going on there and interpersonal stuff, as I recall the story correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess he apparently had a bit of an abrasive personality at times, and as you mentioned, with his engineer and maybe with the government as well. So
I think he got like a grant from the Royal Society. I think I know International Steampunk Day is on the day that he presented the design to the Royal Society. I think he got a grant out of that, and then went horribly over budget. Had a falling out with the engineer. And also then the issues that he kept redesigning the thing while it was already being made, which it sounds very Victorian to me. That type of personality. So It's interesting. I want to do more history videos on the channel. The problem is that I have to do all this alone, and I had a researcher, but he is too busy with his own work. So yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Uh,
if you ever have time, I think that would be interesting, the historical elements that tie into steampunk and similar genres.
oh god, yeah, I'd love to. Actually, I started writing a blog. It's probably gonna take a while about Elegast. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Charlemagne myths of
Oh,
King
yes, to
Charlemagne.
some
Yeah,
extent,
yeah,
yeah.
and Charlemagne and Elegast is like one a very famous one and a very good story. That's apparently is only popular in the Low Countries for some reason, even though he's a French king. Like it might actually be a retelling of an older Germanic tale, which is it's also one perfect example of how to demonstrate the hero's journey because it literally starts that King Charlemagne is woken up by an angel that tells him to go out stealing.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's incongruous. Wow.
yeah, yeah. That's how it starts. It's like it's literally like King Charlemagne is sleeping. All of a sudden, there's I think it's Gabriel, and hey, Charlie, go out stealing. It's like, what? No, it's like, Charlemagne, you gotta go steal. I don't want it. You go out stealing. All right, fine. I'm gonna out stealing, and then he goes on his horse into the night alone. And who do you know? He encounters a black knight, and the Black Knight refuses to tell his name, and Charlemagne and then the knight says, Charlemagne, well, I'll tell you my name if you tell me yours first. And Charlemagne says, no, I won't. And then they duel because that's what you do.
Right.
The Black Knight defeats Charlemagne, and Charlemagne then has to
Oh,
explain what he's doing in the middle of the night. And then the knight introduces himself as Elegast, and like he's this well, if this was D&D, he's kind of like this spell sword. He's a knight, but he also has magical powers. And together they are going to raid this castle that belongs to Charlemagne's brother-in-law, and using his magic, Elegast gets inside, but he's almost cut, and people enter the room, and he quickly, apparently in full armor, goes into none shall pass, basically. He goes under the bed, and that's Charlemagne's brother-in-law comes in with Charlemagne's sister. And the brother-in-law tells him that he has a plot to murder Charlemagne, and of course the sister is very upset by this, and then he strikes her, and she's bleeding, and Elegast quickly takes off his glove and holds it under the bleeding wound, so he has like blood covering the gauntlet, and he shows this to Charlemagne, like your brother-in-law is trying to kill you, and so the plot is uncovered, and
right.
of course it also has to have a good ending, and it turns out that this Black Knight, this Elegast, turns out to be a exiled paladin that was falsely accused, and Charlemagne, now has to make amends, and Elegast marries the now a widowed sister of Charlemagne, and ends well, all's well. So that's basically the story of Charlemagne and Elegast in a nutshell. And this is a very interesting story to analyze because it also like explains this medieval worldview. What I find very interesting is about like the world is magical, right? According to the people of this time, this could happen. This could be an actual story, and I kind of
Right.
like want to use this as a way to demonstrate how fiction changed, like where we're going from
Mm.
this the world is magic into this materialistic, well, basically your smartphone is an excellent example of like we're gonna we're gonna make the metaphysical scientific, and well, now that's also ridiculed, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, speaking of the magical elements, right? I guess that's as you say, one of the elements in the spirit phone, and of course there's the technology with Edison But Edison actually is not the protagonist. He's actually a supporting character, whereas the spirit spoon itself is central. And but magic and technology blend is represented by Aleister Crowley and Nikola Tesla, who are actually the protagonists. And I wanted to include them in the book. And when I thought of the premise, immediately I thought, okay, what's, Tesla Edison rivalry, there's that, but there's a kind of supernatural element. Who should be there? And Aleister Crowley was the obvious choice. And I kind of think of Crowley and Tesla as being this ultimate oil and water, odd couple combination. And as far as I know, or at least as far as I knew at the time, nobody had actually brought the two of them together in a fictional format. I think they have been together in certain respects. And an interesting change is Crowley is not really a villain. Yeah. I think I can't call myself a Crowley expert, but I think there's a lot of kind of misinformation about Aleister Crowley that he has to some extent been unfairly vilified. I'm not necessarily trying to rehabilitate Crowley or saying that it should or shouldn't be done, because that would have to be done non-fictionally. But I wanted to present sort of a different take on him, I guess. Yeah.
Well, he to me, like you said, I think he's vilified, because of his own, but it's also because of his own self-image, like he presented himself as the Beast, for instance, in the 1920s, that type of stuff. So he was a provocateur, but I do think he is, he does seem to have. There's a bit of stigmatized with psychopathic tendencies, where he's very manipulative. That he really likes to take people along. I think that was a motivation for him. But that he is this evil wizard. No, I wouldn't go that far. But most definitely, there's a predatory element to his being. I think that is the case. But yeah.
Right.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I think his he could be unpleasant, I think. And yeah, I suppose manipulative in his relations with people. I think one of the patterns I've seen just looking at reading his biographies and so on is that he would at times, when he felt that somebody was no longer, I guess, in some way useful to him, he would immediately drop them.
Right.
So I think on the one hand, his way of dealing with human relations was kind of, at the very least, somewhat selfish and maybe manipulative. But at the same time, as Crowley himself pointed out in an article published in 1933, I think it was, he was accused in the press of all these horrific things on up to killing people, and yet he'd been to so many countries and no criminal charge had ever been laid against him.
You're right.
So,
yeah.
He was a bit of an unpleasant guy in certain ways, but he wasn't this demented monster who was,
Right.
Murdering people, kind of thing either. So I guess personally, I think it's perhaps a mistake to kind of either idolize or vilify him. He was an interesting person with certain, shall we say, character flaws, but he was also,
I think he was in his writings very preoccupied with power, which would fit well with what you said, that he would drop people the moment they no longer had any use to him. So,
especially women, he was such a, he was, again, nothing criminal, but he would just dump, as soon as he found his next scarlet women, he would dump the previous one.
Our method is science, our aim is religion, says Marshall. That's probably correct. Not familiar with that quote by Crowley, but I believe it. Most definitely enough people these days that want to make science into religion. So, So yeah, is there something you still want to cover before we go to the last few questions?
Uh, well, I think that's about yeah. Well, as far as the book itself, the I think the combination of uh, Crowley and Tesla as protagonists. Oh, well, I think there probably have been a couple of other ones. For example, there's a comic. I haven't really read much of it called Lovecraft and Tesla.
Right.
Tesla and Lovecraft. I forget the name. Crowley pops up. Yeah, for
Okay.
example. I
Ah.
can't claim to have been the very first person to combine Crowley and Tesla. And I don't think I'm the first person to actually include the Edison spirit phone in fiction, although my particular, I guess, take on it is that, yeah, Edison actually markets it
Mm-hmm.
as a commercial product.
Right. Right.
Uh, right. So, yeah, I'm trying to think of what else I could talk about regarding the book that's of import. And another thing that I think is maybe different from other alternate history type stories, or maybe steampunk as well, to whatever extent, there are steampunk elements in my novel. Uh, in many cases, such as in The Difference Engine by Gibson and Sterling, uh, or I suppose your own work as well, the technological differences that from our own world are very obvious. They're in front of everybody. They're part of everyday life. Whereas in my novel, everything looks pretty much like the world of 1899 as we knew it, and the anachronistic technology is behind the scenes and just pops up now and then.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and I guess that's part of the element of things happening behind the scenes that people don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's the same when it comes to the main world of the Association of Ishtar as well. Like, unless you are looking at the art of archaeology, which is like literally an alien world. So, but yeah, I like when steampunk does that, where the technology is far more into the background of the world than it is like front and center. Definitely, and that's
Right.
also what I do in the what you call it, the wrench in the machine as well. Yeah, when can people buy your book and where?
Well, the book will be released on November 15th, 2022. It will be available in hardcover and softcover and ebook. I don't know whether or not there's going to be an audiobook edition. The My publisher, BHC Press, uh, releases books in both print and ebook. Audiobooks are for certain for some titles, but not all. Of course, it'll be available through all major booksellers. In addition, the United States, it will be available in physical formats at the major bookstores. I'm not sure when the pre-order button will be activated.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the cover's not out yet, but yeah, it will be. I don't know
Okay.
when though.
Well, keep us posted, and we'll make sure to share it. Yeah, and with that, let's go to the final question, which I always ask my guests. Do you have some words of wisdom to share with the audience?
Words of wisdom. Wow. Uh, that's you mean about writing or?
Whatever. It might be about
Oh,
writing, it may be about general life lessons.
wow. Okay. Um. hmm. Well, I suppose as far as writing, and I think this has to do with anything that you want to accomplish. It applies to writing, and I hesitate now to say this. Words of wisdom. It makes to frame it that way makes me sound, an insight that I've come to that I should have come to a long time ago. Um, if you're going to try writing a novel, or you're going to try writing a symphony, or you're going to try, coming up with the perfect accounting system, whatever it is you want to do. Um, I think one of the ways to stay motivated is that doing everything you can possibly do and then not succeeding only due factors beyond your control has to be the minimum thing you're going to accept. I think that's a very awkward way of putting it, but when I was coming up with, when I came up with the idea for the Spirit Phone, and when I really got into writing it, and I was determined to, find a publisher, and I thought to myself, well, as a minimum, I want to have the unpublished manuscript with me on my, my deathbed, and know that I couldn't get it published only because I tried everything. Because if I had given up, then I would always wonder, what if I had actually not quit? And I remember hearing or reading somewhere, when you have these surveys, right, of people who are in very advanced years, say 80s, 90s, over 100, and they are asked, is there anything in life that you regret, that you do differently? Sometimes the answer is yes, there was this or that thing that I wanted to try, but I decided not to because people thought that I shouldn't be able to do it, or that it would have been strange. And I thought, no, I don't want to die that way. So whatever you want to do, take not succeeding, which is not the same as failing, only because, because of factors beyond your control. That should be the minimum you accept. Yeah.
No, I think those are good words to end on. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bid you adieu. Arthur, thank you for being here. I will not try.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Not try to keep you up much longer. And okay. For everyone else, of course, best wishes for the new year. And I'll see you all in 2022. And as always, make 2022 your way.